Okay, first things first, you need to get a therapy dog. She needs to be under 10 pounds. I'm going to be giving you 15 years of therapy in just 15 minutes. So I have been in therapy on and off for 15 years since I was like 17. And I've also been a therapist myself for the last 10 years. So I've had a lot of therapy guidance, experience, advice, and hopefully I can like channel what I've sort of cultivated and learned in the last 15 years in the next 15 minutes just for you. So if this sounds like a video that you're interested in, if it's resonating, if you like all topics of like therapy, life, dating, stuff like that, stick around, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, and share. It really helps my channel. So if you are in need of therapy, a one-on-one individualized experience, I have links down below in my description box. There is affordable therapy out there. If you have insurance, if you don't, we can get you connected to the right resources. But this is just broad, sort of general advice. Take what you want and leave the rest. So really kind of like simple sort of thing to start off with, but it's so true. Something that I love about just basic general talk therapy is that it can feel so cathartic to just talk about the issue, to talk about whatever it is that you're dealing with, to talk about your emotions. I mean, I think as human beings, it just feels really good to connect on like a genuine level when we feel seen, heard, validated. So if you have a therapist who's a great active listener, who can, like give you maybe even a different perspective about a certain situation or circumstance, that can feel so refreshing because it's not, why did I say refreshing like that? That can feel so refreshing to get a different perspective and to just be validated and truly seen by a therapist, by a professional who's literally trained in this. It's very different than talking to a friend because, you always have that friend who maybe gives you like some unwarranted advice that's maybe not even that good advice, or, just says all these things that they would do, or whatever it is. A therapist will definitely give you some guidance, perhaps. If you've never been into therapy before or you're new to therapy, talk therapy can be super helpful and, like I said, very cathartic for just processing like family dynamics, emotional issues, circumstances that have happened that you're needing some additional support with. Okay, so the second biggest thing that I've learned in 15 years of being a client and a therapist kind of contradicts the first point. So I believe that it's somewhat of a myth, dare I say, that talk therapy is the end all be all. Don't get me wrong, it's amazing. I literally practice it with my clients. However, that only got me so far in terms of my healing. I remember being in therapy for a long time, just in and out in my young adulthood and teenagehood, and it was all talk therapy, and I would be reaching certain caps and certain limits, and I would hit those ceilings and say, okay, like we keep talking about the same thing over and over and over again, but I'm not like seeing that change reflected in my life. I like to say to my clients too, you can have all of the insight, all of the awareness, but that does not necessarily mean it's going to translate to actual change in your life. So what gets us to really change? Well, it's different for every single person. For some people, it is talk therapy. For me, I had to have more of a holistic approach. So I did different methods of body work. I did yoga. I did breath work, hypnosis. There's just so many other ways to heal. There's sound healing. There's so many healings that I don't even know about. That can really just transform your body and your experience. So that's the other thing, is like the body keeps the score. That's also a really great book recommendation. I'll link that down below as well. We store trauma and energy in the body. So think about it, just like a really simple point of view. If you're just talking about the trauma over and over and over again, that's not necessarily getting it worked through your body, which is why some of these different forms of healing for the body gets movement in, even dance, even just dancing around. It doesn't even have to be something structured. That can be so helpful for your healing journey. So moving on to the third point, something that I learned actually sort of early on with a therapist that, oh my God, she's like so near and dear to my heart. Can't even really fully remember what her name is, but that doesn't matter. So I had her as a therapist in college. I think I was like a sophomore in college. So young adult, like out on my own for the first time. I was going through so much change and transformation and like figuring myself out and so much newness. There was a part of me, and this kind of gets into like, I've talked about this in other videos, but I used to have an addiction to alcohol, and this is where it started, definitely in college and discovering that and what alcohol could do to me, and definitely like the different sort of person I became under the influence and the choices that I would make while intoxicated. And it was such a stark contrast to the sober Brianna, the Brianna that like I knew basically my whole life. So I felt like there was a battle going on. And this therapist at the time told me, she said, I'm going to tell you an old Native American, I think it's a parable story teaching. And she said it's the story of these two wolves. And I thought she was so freaking dope too. Like maybe I just have to set the scene. I don't really remember her office, but like her energy was so freaking cool. And you know, I wanted to be her. You know, at that time I knew I wanted to be a therapist. So I really looked up to her. And she was like, okay, I'm gonna tell you this parable of a Native American grandfather and his grandson. So the Native American grandfather tells the grandson, we all have a battle going on inside of us. There's this good wolf and this bad wolf, and they're battling it out. We all have this war. And the grandson asks the grandfather, well, which wolf wins in the end? And the grandfather says, with all of his wisdom, it is the wolf that we feed. And that has stuck with me ever since. I feel like life can present you with choices in every single moment, and every moment is an opportunity for you to choose a choice that is in alignment with you. Which wolf do you want to feed? So the fourth thing that I want to talk to you about is something that I learned a little bit later on in my therapy journey so far. So it's definitely more recent for me. I've learned it in EMDR therapy because I went back to therapy in the last couple of years to address some trauma that I have been through. So when I was in EMDR therapy, my therapist, obviously very well versed in trauma. It's the first time I saw a trauma specific therapist. And that's another plug. Like if you have heavy trauma, it's very important that you get connected with a therapist who is trained in that. That will like change your experience tenfold. So anyways, she taught me that I had complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And so it's different from PTSD in that complex trauma is a repeated trauma over time that typically happens like, I mean, it can happen at any point in your life, but I experienced that in childhood and adulthood. And so it's just a little different from PTSD in that you have like really negative feelings about yourself. You have really intense feelings of like helplessness, worthlessness, fear, shame, and it's characterized by very problematic, toxic relationships, which definitely have a history of. And it can be so much harder to just like regulate your nervous system and get to a baseline. So the thing that really hit home for me was learning about this diagnosis in that it also comes with emotional flashbacks. And so with PTSD, we always hear about like the classic sort of war veteran who maybe hears a firework or a loud noise. And because of the war that they've been in, they have, you know, they've been triggered and whatnot. And that's like, they can go back in time. That's what being triggered is. You literally reverse back to that trauma. Well, an emotional flashback is somewhat different because the triggers can be very subtle. Often they are very subtle. And so you just kind of like have this feeling come on, this intense shame, helplessness, hopelessness, you know, guilt, and you are ridden with it for a couple hours to a couple days. It can last very long. It's very emotional. And that really stuck out for me, and it honestly helped me just understand myself and my experience so much better. So I'm gonna try to do this as best as I can, but the last point is that literally it's okay to feel your feelings. And this might be the most important point actually, because as human beings, we are hardwired to instinctually avoid pain and suffering. And so part of that pain comes from really heavy emotions. We are all like basically programmed to believe that like negative emotions like sadness, anger, guilt, like all these things, like we don't really want to experience them. So a lot of us will suppress and repress and do all of those things. I spent so many years of my life running from my emotions. And once I finally sat down to actually feel them, cry, dance through them, whatever that process looks like for you, like it will literally change your life, because then you won't be so afraid of having the emotions. The other thing that I've learned from clients too is that like I'm not alone in this. So many of us are so scared to just actually feel the hurt and the pain. But we actually, I feel like, contribute to our suffering more when we don't allow ourselves to just do that. Because the emotion, remember, is energy, and energy can get stored and stuck in the body. And so a really great book rec that I have for this is called Letting Go. I'll link it down in the description below, but it literally talks all about just feeling the emotion and allowing the energy sort of behind that emotion to release the pressure. And I'm like not gonna even do the book so much justice, so I just encourage you to go read it for yourself. But the whole point is to actually feel your feelings and stop running from them. They're not going to hurt you. They're not going to kill you. They are going to make you stronger. And honestly, now, like I was just talking with my wife about this, I love to cry now. Like I cry all the time. It's such a stark contrast from who I used to be and how I used to handle my emotions. Now I just allow them to come on. Also because I know what's on the other side of that. So much relief, happiness, joy, like feeling lighter. So feel your feelings. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you so much. I'm so glad that it resonated. Please leave me a comment below and let me know maybe what you've learned from your therapy experience, and I will see you in the next video.